This conference will now be recorded.
So I'm so glad you guys are here. Let's see, we're about 6 minutes over, mostly because of me. I'm sorry about that. So we've got a couple of we can wait a few more minutes. Although David, do you want to kind of give us your synopsis first of your presentation of our TCO in Prague, and that way you don't have to stay for the whole thing, or what do you think?
Yes, I will be happy to share the uh, feedback about our update in Prague. Uh, yes, but uh, we have presented the one slide which is summarize our few calls activity, and the point was that uh, there is a real challenge for customer to understand what value bring the immersion cooling for from point of view of the um, TCO. And we are focusing on that. And uh, I explained that all this deep job, which should be taken into account, the capex, opex, uh, changes in the IT equipment, etc., is already done in many years by role contribution. So we are already have make a huge step forward with that table for the calculation. And the idea is to involve other participants from industry to join, evaluate, understand, and make their contribution in our TC modeling. So the hall was uh, almost full. A lot of people was there. Attention was really good. A lot of people after our um, presentation joined, and we saw that on the new request to join to our work streams. And what else? So event was extremely good from my point of view, especially for European market, and um, it was a pleasure to present your activity, Alison.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, obviously, we know that again, this group and what warranty and was born out of the hurdles group. So it's great to have you present on our behalf. Thanks so much for having our back on that. So, thank you.
Yes,
I love that. Yeah.
and of course I will be happy to continue our collaboration because from my point of view, TCO modeling is the vital because this is why customer make a decision to shift to the immersion or not. So this
Absolutely.
is most important thing for the customer to understand.
Perfect. I love that. So we know you're there. You're in the midst of all kinds of stuff. So we get if you stick around or hang around. I think you might be excited to hear. I think I'll just Mike, if you're ready, I'm gonna turn the floor over to you. Do you have any slides you wanted to share? So y'all, this is Mike Montez with GRC. He is going to share with us. I caught him off guard this week. Sorry. So he's, but he was willing to jump in and say, sure, I'll go ahead and speak to at least some beginning stages of how GRC has unpacked their TCO. So if you want to share your screen, you let us know, but Mike, you have the floor.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Yeah, Allison invited me over to join this call. I was hoping to listen in today to find out exactly what the kinds of things you're looking at. But as I mentioned to her, a lot of the TCO is going to be the same regardless of which brand you look at for immersion. A lot of the same things. Energy savings is a big deal, um, and so forth. And I do have some basic slides. I didn't put anything together, but I can certainly pull up the ones that are kind of critical to us, and again would also apply to anyone in immersion. Um, But let me see what I have here. Again, I wasn't quite ready for this, but
Yeah, it's my fault. I caught him off guard. I asked yesterday. So, but look at how, you know, look at him go. I love it. So, Rolf, can you give him permission to share his screen or?
Yes. Let's see, where are you? Mike Montes. You have those permissions yourself as well, Edison. You should, because I made you an organizer, you should be able to distribute these rights and permissions.
Hmm.
If not, just keep asking me, that's all.
okay. Yeah, I just put in, again, these are basic screenshots. I just grabbed a bunch together. I was hoping to get some information from the whole group to find out exactly what you're looking for. But I think a lot of these things that you hear out there, where are people putting data centers or putting IT equipment? Doesn't have to be a full data center. Um, but if you look at all this that's out there, these are ways that you can bring down the cost of ownership by looking at immersion. Real estate cost is expensive, and if you can minimize your footprint or put it outside in a building in a containerized solution, there's just a lot of things that you can do there um, to save money. And again, I'm just kind of looking at different things. Uh, but when we start looking at a data center, the nice thing about immersion, you don't have to fool around with all the air conditioning, so cracks really aren't needed. You don't need a raised floor, no chillers, because most of the systems can run with warm water. Again, depending on where you are and what you're trying to achieve. Uh, and we can reduce the amount of basically the PUE and also power for the systems, because when you remove the fans, that does remove anywhere from 10 to 20%. We've even seen some customers that have seen even higher savings depending on the systems. And I come from an IT background, and I know that the company I used to work for spent a lot of time year after year trying to figure out how to reduce the fan power, going to more efficient fans, being able to go in BIOS to reduce the fan consumption, because that does take a lot of power um, in a system. So by reducing that power, we're able to have that savings that we see in power. So that's one of the biggest things that we see. We like this particular slide. Uh, if you're looking at 1 megawatt of compute uh, and you start comparing it to standard air-cooled systems on a server, if you remove the fans, that we're down to 10% less power or more. I think Intel has a higher number for an average of power savings by reducing the fans. And this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult about the mechanical PUE, what that really means, because we're we're taking that PUE number and comparing it to a lower amount of IT power consumption. So, but it still gives you an idea of the kind of power savings you can have by reducing by going immersion and not having to deal with all the air conditioning and so forth. But that's where we see the biggest savings. Um, and we do have some case studies, customers that have figured out how to increase their power consumption, or actually utilize their power consumption that they had, or available power a lot more, a lot better, um, just because they were able to go back and shut down crack units, shut down the UPSs for the crack units, and free up power in their data center to be able to put more IT equipment and run their business. But yeah, we have a lot of other things in here when we talk about value propositions, about how you can reduce your data center construction cost if you're doing something new, the cooling expenses cost, the total maintenance cost, and all that. Because if you don't have air conditioning units or the humidity controls, those are things you don't have to maintain. But the TCO is going to vary depending whether this is brownfield or greenfield situation. So those are the things that we have to keep in mind as we start talking about TCO and in an immersion environment or a mixed environment. So uh, again, these are the kind of slides that we use to talk about the infrastructure requirement. We greatly reduce that. But again, if we're going into an environment where you already have air cooling, um, then we have to discuss how much the TCO will be in your particular environment. And I noticed that some of our competitors are on the line, and I'm sure they would agree with that as they approach their customers in terms of how they can save money in their particular environment.
This is great, Steph. Thanks so much. What we might do is, as you, we of course, I'm thrilled that you were interested even prior to me asking to join our work stream, and so maybe we'll have you have a little bit more time to pull something else together and make another deep dive. What I love about the diagram you just showed, I think that's definitely what the customers want to see. It's extremely digestible. I'm a very visual person, so I like to see things visually. However, as I mentioned yesterday on our call, we're in our infancy here. We kicked off in January. We've had a couple of really good input calls. Rolf, huge input on one that has been kind of worked on over years and years, and it gets very much to the nitty gritty and a lot of variables. But end of the line, I don't know if our end game is wanting to have something pretty concise, such as what we're all looking at. But you got to be able to get there, and that's where we're trying to. Right now, we're just doing some of our due diligence to see where we want to go with this.
Yeah,
So
and I was just talking to my manager a little while ago, and some of the aspects also is, how do you depreciate the equipment? What kind of a schedule do you use? That part of the financial aspect also comes in. How long will the equipment last? Typically we're looking at 10 years. We have customers that have had our products in production for about 11, 12 years now, and they're still using the same fluids, and they haven't really had to buy additional fluid or swap it out. The lifespan of these particular synthetic hydrocarbon fluids are quite long. So
So does
those are
anybody,
some.
oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. Yeah, no,
Go
that's
ahead.
excellent. That's excellent. I was just wondering if anybody else out there has any questions right now for Mike, or maybe because this is his first time presenting to us, but just thought I'd let you open the floor to anyone else like to kind of do some rapid fire questions to him.
Mm, I have a question, but I don't know. Is it um, Mike can comment that or not? But I see that the mechanical PUE is a ratio between the power installation power input and its not reflect to the climate. I mean, the installation power can be cooling energy 700 kilowatt, but during the winter it is less, and for that reason the PUE should be a little bit lower. So my question is, why it is so?
Well, the PUE is probably not right now the best way to measure this. This is the tools that we currently have that we're using. I know there's a lot of talk about using different methods to calculate the total power utilization other than PUE, because you can see here, uh, this is an ideal situation, and I'll be honest with you. If we're going into a situation where you already have a data center and you're adding immersion, then you're not going to realize a lot of those particular savings. Like in this particular picture, uh, they may have had crack units, and you can start reducing that kind of stuff. So every installation is going to be different as to what you can capture in terms of TCO, what it's going to mean to the particular customers. Because in this environment, you've got all these crack units, so you already have a certain amount of power being utilized. But if you go into a situation where it's a brand new data center, uh, and you can remove all that, then you can actually increase that PUE as well, or the amount of total power that you use in a particular situation.
Yeah, in
Okay.
addition to there's another reason why PUE is completely unusable for comparison between air and immersion. That's because with immersion you're also saving energy on the IT side, which is on the wrong side of the equation of PUE figures. So in terms of efficiency or even a TCO indicator, PUE is completely and utterly meaningless. it doesn't give anything, any usable information about how it affects TCO.
Yes, we most more use PoE just to simplicity for the customer, but of course, I agree that PoE is not show the reduction of IT energy.
Mike, hey, it's Chad Cape from Liquid Cool Solutions. Just want to say thanks for sharing some of your insights with us. With respect to the observation about depreciation of dielectric liquid, I would encourage you and everyone on this call to talk with your favorite CPAs in accounting firms. The fact of the matter is the dielectric liquid has a very long useful life. And actually, depending on where our friends in the oil business or in federal governments who control interest rates and inflation, we have seen the value of and cost of dielectric liquid going up. So to the extent that it's a tradable liquid asset, wink, wink, nod, nod, no pun intended, that might appreciate in value. I would contend we could make an argument to our CPA friends that it shouldn't be depreciated at all. And it could be, this is just one voice in the wind, but if there's more voices making that argument, do we depreciate air that's blown around by fans? I will acknowledge that air has been around a lot longer than our dielectric liquids. But it may take a while before we get here and convince people, but just food for thought.
Yeah, those are all things that we have to work with.
I just want to respond to that because I like the thoughts that you put on the table, and there's absolute merit to it. But in terms of the goals of a unified TCO model, I think we have to be careful with including all the things that you could do, which are not fully embedded in the industry yet, and just focus on the direct cost, because otherwise we're getting into this into a rabbit hole with all sorts of things that may not be recognized by everyone yet. So if we can just stick to, I think the TCO effects of liquid cooling in general, without going into the more exotic elements that people don't really relate to yet, is already so convincing that it really that it helps to stay on the topics that are relevant for people now.
Fair enough, Rolf.
But I do completely agree with what you're saying, right? There's so much potential, but for me it falls in the same category as heat reuse as well, right? Where it's difficult to do blanket statements of the value of heat reuse simply because it's still only a fraction of the industry that is really looking at it and is really calculating it into their business models.
Fair enough. And maybe as the only recovering commercial banker on the call, there's probably one or two others. I would remind everyone that typically the depreciation scale for computer equipment is 3 or 5 years. As Mike just mentioned, 10 years is a no-brainer for this fluid. Candidly, when you think about HVAC equipment, which is really what we're competing against, ventilation ducts, piping, all these other things, that's really a 30-year amateur depreciation schedule. So, Rolf, you're right. We need to not get too esoteric, but people definitely look at the dielectric liquid as, that big cost that we can't contend with. But if you can take 3 or 5 year amorts and go out to 10 or 30 years or infinite, that kind of is one way you can make this disappear. So
that's also for everybody. Yeah, and again, I don't disagree with the statements, but there's also in a perfect world that would definitely be the case. But if you look at the discussions that we're currently having in other work streams about cascading effects for materials that may or may not dissolve in the fluids, and how that can affect the chemistry of the fluid with multiple material compatibility considerations coming in, I personally, in my business so far, I've always recommended just to be on the safe side with the fluids and just replace the fluids with every IT refresh cycle. So if you replace IT equipment, be safe and also replace the fluids just to avoid any unforeseen compatibility risks regarding the chemistry of the fluid. And considering the current discussions, I think I completely agree with you that the fluids are probably going to be fine for 20 years. But with the risk and warranty struggles that there already are, I think it's going to be reasonable that fluids in the future will simply be attached to IT deployment that sits within. So again, this is where I think we have to be very careful, very conservative with all these additional benefits that I know for a fact that they're there, but which poorly connect to the world view of end users who are still identifying immersion as a risk.
Yeah, on the
Mm.
fluid
I don't
side,
want to get a negative spin, right? So forgive me, forgive me if that is the case. But
yeah, the thing about the fluid, there's a lot of different petrochemical companies or oil companies that are making the fluids, synthetic hydrocarbons, and what the type of warranty that they're willing to do, it's really going to depend on them. Like I said, we have customers that have had product in production for over 10 years, 11 years, still using the same fluid. We test it every year. We send it to the petrochemical manufacturer. They test it, tell us that it's still within spec and all that. We also have another company, university, that's been doing using our product for about 9 years, and that's the same case. Uh, my background's IT. I worked for HPE, and we had a GRC tank there for about 9 years, and we've never experienced any issues with the liquid. It's still the same liquid that's out there, and they just got rid of it recently because they're putting in a new tank for testing. But you know, the, I was told they pulled out a server out of the tank that'd been there for 5 years, and it still worked just fine. So the quality of the fluids is going to depend on the particular vendor. The pricing of the fluid's going to be way, there's a broad range depending again on the vendor that you use.
yeah, again, I don't disagree, but and I know for a fact that what you're saying is correct, right? We're not talking about the warranty on the fluid itself. We're talking about IT equipment warranty that is associated with clean fluids. If you look at the discussions that are currently being generated by input from Intel, like, the concerns for IT equipment warranty are quite significant when it comes to the chemical consistency of the fluid that the IT equipment sits within, and that's a great concern for the potential for blanket warranty for IT equipment in immersion. And I think the
Yeah.
purity and the original state of the fluid will very likely be combined with IT equipment warranty.
Yeah, that's gonna, you're right. It's gonna make a difference, the type of fluid. I think one supplier of fluids is trying to indemnify the vendor from damage to their IT equipment by use of their fluid. So you're going to see some of that because we're seeing competition from a lot of major vendors. Shell Oil, for example, is one that has already come to us, and we actually have a press release saying that they've been certified through what we call our ElectroSafe program, which is a program where we test the fluids for safety, for compatibility and performance and things like that. And there's several others that have come to us. Castor Oil is another one that has been gone through our certification or our validation. It's not really certification program. And we have others that we're working with, Lubrizol. There's some companies out of France. There's one company out of France that's looking to have their oil is actually recycled vegetable oil. We're still trying to figure out how that's going to work, but there's a lot of competition out there from a lot of different vendors, and
Well,
hopefully
Chad,
that'll
oh, sorry.
go ahead.
No, You're okay. Chad, I always love your your input too. So, but yeah, I think Rolf and nailed it. We can almost get into a rabbit hole on some of this, and I think Eddie and I realize that we're probably going to spend 6 months just chatting this out amongst everyone because you know all of our history, Chad, your history, obviously, how many people would even think about the IRS and fluid? Like, not very many people. And that's because we're all living and breathing this. I think there's so many, my personal opinion about immersion is there's so many benefits you actually cannot capture it all. So, and so you have to actually take 2 steps back and say, all right, we need to win the customer. We need to show them, the benefits of this, but we don't want them to glaze over with information. And so this is where we decided to kind of come into this and say, how much do you guys think we need to see? What are the variables we need to address, like phase one? And we're still just talking about phase one, but we love the heat reuse. I mean, my goodness, it's mind blowing the opportunity there. But we decided, hey, let's table that one until maybe phase two, or and no pun against phase, two phase fluid or systems, but that's another thing we might unpack later. I know Honeywell's on here, so as far as a two-phase TCO, we decided we're going to focus on single phase right now, just because it really gets us so going to be hard to kind of wrap our arms back around this and try to get somewhere in the next couple of months.
So Allison, if I could chime in, this is Rich Lappenbush. I'd like to second Chad's comments and say, for most of the customers trying to learn about this, a lot of them are going to struggle to try to explain to their CPA or their finance professional at their firm what it means to them. And I think it is important, at least we take the US tax law as a base to start with and say, yeah, the servers are depreciated over 7 years, network equipment is over 10 years, and yes, you can, and other people have, combined a tank and a fluid and a server together and rolled it together and called it one asset, and that is accepted by the IRS. And we should provide a reference example slide, maybe in the appendix. It's supporting documentation, but it does say, look, you could do this. This is done all the time by people rolling together assets this way. And I think that's important to at least comment on, that it is an accepted practice. I'm not saying this group should do it, but we should at least reference out and say it can be done, it is done as a normal business practice.
I love that. Anyone
At the
else?
same time, Rich's point, Rolf's point about us needing and wanting to be conservative is true. We don't need to be selling snake oil because we're selling physics. And Rolf, I hear you loud and clear.
Mike, do you have
One
anything?
thing I wanted to ask.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you asking me? I just had like a brief question. So we mentioned about benefits of PUE and energy saving. So what about computation? Is energy saving the most tangible or feasible way of providing benefits to customers, or it is actually performance benefit or computational data? So is it gonna have, obviously there are a lot of benefits in terms of immersion space, but is the most quantifiable way, because there is a lot of focus obviously on the energy saving, and obviously it is going to be the most important thing, but I've talked to many people that a lot of people say that actually we're selling performance, computational performance at the end of the day. That's what the value proposition that would eventually matter. So I wonder, for like economic analysis, are we gonna take that into consideration, or are we gonna stick to performance and like just gonna stick to like power,
I think
water
you cannot
consumption,
stick to
energy
power
consumption?
because power is such a small part of the overall TCO effect. I think the image that was on the screen just a second ago, that speaks to itself, right? Because most of the savings are literally in excluding so much of the infrastructure in your facility. That is the biggest cost effect that immersion brings, that you don't need a huge amount of the equipment that you currently would need inside an air-cooled facility. And the energy efficiency goes into the OPEX side, which is currently, for pilots, that is probably one of the bigger considerations. Simply because the infrastructure savings in facilities, you don't really get to see those in brownfield installations. Sorry, I know that some people don't like the term brownfield, but it's it's something that in the IT industry is still well recognized. But when you're looking at total facility deployment or designing a new facility, there is such a huge difference in designing it for air cooling versus designing it for liquid cooling, that most of the cost savings are in capex. Those are immediate. Those cost savings are huge because you get to exclude so much of your traditional infrastructure. The energy efficiency is an add-on that goes into your OPEX, so your operational cost, and something that increases margins for an end user, but it highly depends on who you're targeting with a TCO model. Are you targeting an end user that owns and operates its own IT environment and data center? Then there's a lot more that is relevant for whoever is looking at a TCO model. If you're looking at a facility like a co-location facility that will accommodate liquid cooling, there are again different aspects that are relevant to them that will need to attach to their business models. So it's a difficult question to answer, in my personal opinion. There is not one preferred metric to showcase. An HPC, a supercomputer, will be most interested in cost per flop, right?
Rolf?
Yeah, go ahead, David. Please go ahead.
Yes, I just want to say that this is very good question about PUE, why we pay attention for that. Usually for that industry, it was important the efficiency of the facility, because co-location data centers was focused on that because cooling was 70-80% of their costs. And this is why PUE was important. But now when we talk about immersion, it's touched not on the facility, but also servers. It means that we touch the customer. And co-location don't care about the customer. I mean, they don't care, is it 10 kilowatt or 100 kilowatt their IT load. They care about their performance. So in this case, in immersion, we make heavily reduction in cooling for the co-location, but at the same time, we make reduction of the server energy consumption, which is 10% for the cost of the running servers. And this is important thing that we touch the customer side. And in our case, I agree that PUE it's not so important because we have integrated approach. We are in conjunction between the colo and the customer all together. And I just want to say that PUE in immersion cooling has less importance than comprehensive TCO analysis, and this is why we are pushing that comprehensive TCO modeling.
Agree, and also I think PUE in general today this might be a controversial statement that I'm going to make right now, but I think PUE has served its purpose and is no longer useful. I don't think that anybody currently would ever consider building a data center that is not completely efficient for the location that it's built in. PUE has done a lot for the industry over the years, right? Because 20 years ago, people were just focused on the IT equipment, making it run. Nowadays, facilities are built with efficiency in mind. PUE, I don't think PUE is relevant anymore, to be honest, especially with taking into account all these various liquid cooling platforms that are commonly deployed nowadays, or at least relatively commonly. PUE has no meaning other than internal monitoring whether the data center is still running efficient or not, in my opinion.
I'm sorry. I joined a little bit late today. Apologies, I had a customer call. But what's wrong with the PoE? Isn't that just maybe a naive question, but isn't that a measure on how efficiently you're using the power that's coming in? What's wrong with that?
The problem is that PUE is used incorrectly these days to compare facilities between each other. And data center facilities already are built today as very efficient environments. If you look at the technology types that are now being deployed in facilities, especially when you're taking liquid cooling into account, liquid cooling can have a negative effect on PUE while increasing efficiency. So the usefulness of PUE as a metric to useful overall efficiency in a facility is no longer applies when you take liquid cooling into account. 20 years ago, it was really useful. But nowadays, with the way the facilities are all being built, I don't believe in PUE anymore, because data centers are as efficient as they can get. There's some outdated facilities still there, but those will naturally disappear over time.
Yeah,
May I
but
add one
still,
very specific point?
with that said, majority, just to respond quickly, with that said, I mean, yes, definitely liquid cooling is coming more and more, but based what we see, a vast majority of data centers that are built today, they're still air cooled. And if I'm not mistaken, PUE of air cooled is not even close to the one that you can get with a liquid cooling. So
Not necessarily the case. It depends on the region. If you look at the meta facilities in the Arctic, or even all the hyperscale facilities there's a reason why they're all built in colder climates. You don't need to put it. There's not really an effort that you have to make them efficient, because the ambient temperature around the facilities are low enough to avoid compression cooling altogether. So that means you're efficient. But don't forget, a PUE of 2.0 in Dubai is still incredibly efficient, and there's not much that PUE can do to facilitate further efficiency there as an industry metric. It is
May I add one very
obviously
specific
it's still
point?
useful to do internal monitoring whether you're running more efficient than the previous year, but it's absolutely no longer a useful tool to compare facilities with each other across the globe in different climates.
Yeah,
And
there's
with the addition of liquid cooling, where you're saving energy on the IT side, that can actually have a negative effect on the PUE while reducing the overall energy footprint of a facility. You may get, because you're saving energy, in some cases a lot of energy on the server side, you're saving on the wrong side of the equation, which means you can have a stable PUE while reducing 30% of your energy footprint, but the PUE remains the same while you're running the same
But
IT.
didn't we talk about here's my net energy that for my IT equipment, right, like for the computation and whatnot, right? And then everything else is kind of overhead. And we in that overhead, if that overhead goes down, isn't that goodness? Maybe I'm missing something. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. But the equation PUE is a comparison between overall power consumption versus IT power consumption. If you
Right.
save IT power consumption, your PUE goes up.
How you save IT power consumption?
If you
Less
make the
fans.
IT more efficient, you're saving on the wrong side of the equation, right? So if you don't touch your infrastructure and you just save power on the IT side, your PUE can actually go up. I'm not saying that is the case for real life scenarios, but it doesn't show the
I
actual
follow. I follow
impact.
you. Yeah, yeah. I thank you. I follow your logic. The question is like if you, but didn't we say that even in your presentation, a couple of sessions ago, we said that we keep that Apple as constant, the IT power.
But it's not.
So
The power that's
That
actually
is the
used by
model
the
that I
server.
contribute. Yes, so
okay.
that is in what the model that I contributed states. So it deducts the overhead within the server as well, and then uses the IT
Okay.
power as a
Okay.
constant. Yeah, but that is already beyond PUE. PUE includes power supply losses and fan power as IT power.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Okay. I see.
uh,
I see.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
Rolf, I think that if Mike will show that slide, in that case, it will be much clearer what we are talking about, because
yeah,
everything starts from the presentation with this
Yeah.
conversation.
Sorry,
Mhm.
I derailed the conversation, so we might want to park this one.
No,
Like I
and
said,
my apologies. I joined late and I was a little bit confused because I thought that POE. Okay, okay. So yeah, if the some of the inherent attributes of air cooled are as part considered as part of IT equipment in the POE equation, I 100% agree.
Yeah, but here's where PUE is so important, I think, from a selling perspective. If you if you eliminate fan power, board fan power,
Hmm.
and replace it with pump power, if you're doing recirc pumps or what have you, um, just making people aware of the fact that the data center industry has been uh, understating PUE because of board fans. I actually think the PUE ratio is a great selling point, perhaps our greatest, even compared to other liquid cooling methods, right? I mean, if you're doing rear door stuff, you still got fans and board fans and things like that going on. This, to me, the PUE comparison and real true PUE is a huge selling point. So I'm a little surprised, Rolf, that you want to sort of make it go away. At the end of the day, if you take the board fan power as IT power, move it over to auxiliary, you reduce. Well, actually, I mean, So let's say IT power or board fan power is 1 or 0.1, and IT power is 0.9. If you shift that power from IT power into cooling, which is really where the board fan goes, it's a win. So I don't know.
so
yeah,
I
that's
put,
correct.
It is
PUE
part of
doesn't
the.
allow that, right?
I was going
I
to say, I
want to
put
go
in the
back to
chat
the
that,
whole point that like it is. I think it is part. PUE is part of the whole picture, not the whole thing. Obviously, the cost of equipment and what performance you can get to it, all of it together will become a case. But I think PUE becomes maybe more important for the co-location cases. I wish I could hear from like the customers where they actually like sell a service, for instance, a Google TPU. On their side, they're selling a service, so they're pricing their service, and part of the cost of the service is based on energy saving, not the whole thing. So it really comes down to the point again, for the TCO model, which part are we isolating or targeting? Are we just targeting the facility itself, or an
I
enterprise
think,
model, for instance?
I think it's
Yeah,
going
and
to
that's
depend
why
on
you
the
get into the
customer.
Apple. So that's why you get into the apples and pears, right? You need to find an apple to compare. Sorry, go
And
ahead,
Uh,
Mike.
and that Apple, based on what I see right now, is it should be the just the compute itself without any overhead associated with cooling or or cooling that equipment, right? If the fans were included in the compute power, it seemed wrong to me.
Well, if you're
but
in
the
air,
fence
you have
is
to
a
include the fan.
part of server.
Yeah, if
Without
Exactly.
you're in
fence,
Right.
air,
Yeah,
you
server
have
will
to.
not work.
yeah.
Yeah.
So back to the IRS guidelines, if you can operate a server without a fan, then the fan doesn't need to be included in the asset. If the server cannot operate without the fan, it must be included in the asset. That's strict tax law.
So if we come up with a design without the fans, then we don't have to include it, right?
That's right. So I'll pick on you guys. So the Intel Atom chip doesn't need a fan. You can use a fan with it if you wish to, because you might have extra junk in there, and you might
Mm-hmm.
create an asset that's bundled with Atom chips. But my point is, if the bundled product must have a fan to operate, then it must be included in the asset. Therefore, it must be depreciated at that schedule.
Got it. Makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, but right now people are converting air-cooled systems, and they're still having to pay for the fans even though they remove them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
good point.
think
So
It's a
yeah.
transitionary problem, right? It's as liquid cooled cooling system takes over at some point. Hopefully, there will be more, production of liquid optimized system coming without fans.
yeah, we
Yeah.
hope
So
that's the
this
case.
is where and this is where the model that I shared last time, that model assumes generates apples based on, okay, let's figure out what the core function is. That's digital performance. And let's extrapolate what the footprint is of that digital performance and then create a comparison. And also, it assumes that the cost of IT will remain the same, whether there are fans in one case or not in the other case, because also designing something for liquid is going to come with additional cost or other complexities, or compared to air cooling equipment. And that is a rabbit hole where you really can't get into with any kind of TCO model, because you have to take into account billions of variations for IT equipment in the market. And I think that it's not going to be useful to really get into the cost difference of IT in immersion versus air. Is it something that you guys would agree on, or is it something that really has to be quantified in the TCO approach? The cost difference of a server in air versus in liquid per a certain amount of IT performance.
I think we need to have it. I think all of these. It's a fantastic discussion, basically saying like, hey, there are certain nuance coming to server done for air and server done for liquid, right? And the apple that we're talking about. I think we need to approach the right apple that eventually needs to be there, but we need to be able to calculate the TCO both ways, because some customers will use older versions and whatnot and converting them, and some will use newer versions. Additionally, the PoE as the concept itself, it's similar to spec in trade. Everybody hates spec in trade, but it's still used to write checks and buy compute equipment, right? So same with PoE. I think this PoE will stay for a while, even though we may not believe it's an optimal way. So I think we have to face it one way or another.
Yeah,
There's no
I agree with you.
disagreement with that one.
Yeah, I agree with
Where
the
would
PUE
everyone look?
because that's what people are using PUE. But I put a link on the chat room on a paper that talks about why PUE is not a good metric anymore. Um,
Mhm.
but
Great document.
how many of our customers have actually read that and still use PUE as the measurement? So we have to keep that in mind.
It's the simplicity of PoE that
Hmm.
Well,
I
even
agree with both.
the
that's
It's just
hard to.
simplicity. It's not comprehensive.
No, it's not.
I will
Not
tell
at
you,
all.
even
We can agree on that. We can agree on that, but we still have to live with that.
Yeah.
I will I will say
We
even the
may hate
Department
it, but we still live to that with that.
even the Department of Energy is very PUE. All of everything, anything to do with the DCEP program. I mean, they start telling you how to calculate the PUE. But I went in and I love that. Seen that document, Mike. If you all want some light reading, go download that document. But it's really good. It's really great.
And just the last thing I want to say about PUE, be aware that over the past 5 years, PUE has completely flatlined industry-wide. There's no more reduction in the global average PUE in facilities for the last 5 years. Not significant anyway.
So we've got like what 3 minutes left, and I wanted to thank you, Mike and David. Of course, Rolf always for having my back too. So sorry. And Mike, I think we'd like to maybe have like a second deep dive, a little bit more into some of the things and how you guys get kind of like what we had from Rolf. We'll talk about it too. Yoselita, I know you and your team were figuring out when you guys could put something together too. I know. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, we kind of just agreed this week that probably on next session we will do something short. It's not going to be the whole session, but just
Okay.
share our inputs with David and
That sounds
Montes.
great. I will say, Rolf reminded me we had a call this week. In fact, it revolved around Green Grid, and any time. So my apologies because I didn't say this yesterday, but we have to make it a little bit agnostic when we make our presentations. So just remember that moving forward, and that's I will take the hit on that today. So that way we're all just bringing information to the table. Of course, you're presenting the information, but we have to be careful as OCP. I'm still learning all those rules myself. So
Yeah. Thanks, Alison, for running the call today. I apologize. I had something from my work that I had to attend to. So one more open. I don't know if you guys discussed it in the beginning. It's we working with TGG, the Green Grid, to make sure we can fully and openly use the intended definitions and stuff like that. There are a couple of legal formalities that we really need to work through. I would like us, hopefully in the next call or call after that, it's a great discussion about PUE, not PUE, what are the better metrics and all of that. I think we'll come to a good point for us to discuss and align on the definitions, and hopefully by that time we will be legally clear to use the TGG definitions as well. So I'm looking forward for that definition conversation. What we agree, what's the apple, what are the metrics that we are driving to compute.
And regarding to the content that was presented today, I would be very interested in the actual calculations that are behind the promotional style statements. So how have you come to those numbers? What is the method that applied? What has been included and what has been excluded? What is the depth that you've gone to regarding the calculation of these kind of models? Because I think that's what it all comes down to in the TCO modeling, that we get a view of how different TCO calculations are coming to the numbers, and to define what level of detail would be most appropriate. It's something that I would be very interested in learning more about.
well, Mike, that would be great. You just let us know, and we can have another conversation, Mike and I can. So about that, and then Yoselita, you just let us know when you guys would like to also make a short presentation. Does anybody else have anything before we wrap it up? I know we're at the hour, so.
I just have one item to add, which is I have been advised by the Green Grid that they will expose a new glossary without having to log into the greengrid.org. And I'm going to put a link of where that glossary will be in the next few weeks. I'll be working on that to expose basically all the liquid terms that were used in the handbook.
Oh, that's
Fantastic.
awesome.
Excellent.
That's great.
Wonderful.
It's really good.
It's not there yet. It'll, like I
Okay.
said, it just got agreed to yesterday.
Looking forward, keeping the fingers crossed.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, again, thank you, Rolf, for having my back and Eddie for getting this kicked off and my technical difficulties. And so we will see you guys again in 2 weeks. And thanks so much for joining us. Rolf, if you want to,
Thanks
can
so
you end
much.
I can't end the recording, Rolf, so I will leave that up to you or